My name is Courtney Daze.
And I'm MaKayla Rodriquez.
Today we are going to talk about currency swaps, which is the topic that we chose as our exotic security. Before we dive into currency swaps, I wanted to be sure that everyone knew what a general swap was. The definition of a swap is an agreement between two groups or counterparties to swap or trade a series of cash flows for a specific time period at a specified interval in time. Swaps first occurred in 1981 when the International Business Machine Corporation, better known as IBM, and World Bank entered into an agreement, which later became what we know as a currency swap today. A currency swap is when two counterparties exchange principal and interest payments in one currency for principal and interest payments in another currency. Next, I am going to give you an example of a currency swap. Let us consider that we have two firms. The first company, the building on the left, has issued a bond that is denominated in US dollars, and across the ocean, another company, the building on the right, has issued a bond that is denominated in euros. These two counterparties enter into a currency swap, particularly a fits-for-fits currency swap, which we will define later on in the presentation. The first thing that they do is exchange the principal. This exchange in principal at the start of the swap makes currency swaps unique from other swaps, especially plain vanilla interest rate swaps. This amount usually tracks pretty closely with the exchange rate. In this example, perhaps this is an exchange of $10 million for 6 million euros. After the exchange of principal, usually around the 6-month interval, the two companies will exchange interest payments. Since this example is a fits-for-fits swap, this means that the counterparty on the right is paying a fixed rate of interest in dollars on the principal via a financial intermediary to the other counterparty. The counterparty on the left is paying a fixed rate in euros on the principal via a financial intermediary to the counterparty on the right. Since this is a fits-for-fits swap, both groups know from the beginning exactly what the principal exchange will be and what the interest payments will be. At maturity, the counterparties will exchange back the principal. Each counterparty has transformed its obligation. The company that started with a dollar-denominated bond obligation has essentially transformed it into an obligation based in euros. The other counterparty on the right has transformed a euro-denominated obligation into a dollar-denominated obligation. There are three different types of currency swaps. The first type is called a fits versus fits currency swap. This means that both streams of currency swap contracts have fixed interest payments. The second type is known as a fits versus float, or a float versus fits currency swap. This type of currency swap means that one side of the currency swap involves a stream of fixed interest payments, while the other side is a stream of floating interest payments. The third type is a float versus float currency swap, which means both parties in the currency swap contracts use floating interest payments. The float versus float currency swap is referred to as the basic swap. A currency swap typically has three stages. Stage 1 is when the spot exchange of the principal amount occurs. This exchange of the principal establishes part of the swap agreement. The second stage is the exchange of interest payments during the term of the swap. This typically takes place on the 6-month mark. The last stage of a currency swap is the re-exchange of principal at the maturity date. Next, we are going to talk about who purchases and sells currency swaps. Since currency swaps help hedge risk, a wide variety of people and companies use these swaps for many different purposes. A few examples of users of these currency swaps are international investors, banks, multilateral corporations, and institutional investors for funding foreign currency investments. The maturity of currency swaps can be anywhere from 1 year to 30 years. It just depends on the individual swap.
And now I will continue talking about who sells and purchases currency swaps. Multilateral corporations will choose to enter into a currency swap in order to make payments to the borrowing country in their own currency and receive payments in their domestic currencies, which mitigates exchange rate volatility. Banks and institutional investors will choose to enter if they are seeking to lower their lending rates when they are taking loans or issuing bonds abroad to fund their operations or to expand their operations. International investors may use currency swaps if they are looking to hedge their investments against exchange rate fluctuations when they are buying bonds, equity, or real estate in foreign countries. Global banks usually act as intermediaries in a swap transaction to help bring the two groups together. The U.S. Commodity Futures Trading Commission regulates the currency swaps market. We will talk about this a little later when we talk about the Dodd-Frank Act. The reason that currency swaps are used is primarily to hedge potential risk associated with exchange rate movements and to minimize cost and interest rates on loans in other countries. They can be used to secure an exchange rate for an extended period of time, and they do not have to be monitored. Currency swaps also do not have to appear on the balance sheet like a typical loan would. Since these swaps are traded over the counter, this makes them susceptible to risk of the counterparty defaulting on the swap. Credit risk is shifted towards the end of the swap. The big principal is due at the end, therefore the other party is more likely to not be able to pay. The cash flows expected are the interest payments from the other party. The exchange rate resets when there is a coupon payment. A small payout is expected. Interest is paid out in the currency swapped for by both parties on each coupon payment date in a dealer-to-dealer transaction. Dealer-to-consumer markets are more complicated. Many variables can be changed depending upon each customer. Now I will talk about the effect the Dodd-Frank Act has on currency swaps. After the financial crisis of 2008, the Dodd-Frank Act improved the authority of the U.S. Commodity Futures Trading Commission. CFTC oversees more than $400 trillion in the swaps market. Due to the Dodd-Frank Act, the CFTC is able to keep risk lower in the swaps market. Swaps dealers are contingent to capital and margin requirements, reporting requirements, and to meet conduct standards. It also improves pricing by increasing transparency to trading of swaps. Currency swaps are customized contracts that are traded as over-the-counter derivatives between private parties. Since it is over-the-counter, this means that it does not go through an exchange. It is traded directly between the two parties or with a bank acting as an intermediary.